building a better Bay Area, moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7, Hulu Live, and wherever you stream. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. We've seen a wave of smash and grab mass robberies in the Bay Area. It all started Friday night when a band of thieves hit the Louis Vuitton store in San Francisco's Union Square, as well as other businesses. Rodney Fong with the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce will be joining us to talk about what's changing. But first, Thanksgiving is almost here, and for many, it'll be their first time traveling and gathering indoors during the pandemic. The difference is, obviously, we have vaccines this year, but there's still concerns about a winter surge. Joining us now is Dr. Peter Chin Hong from UCSF. Always great to see you, Dr. Chin Hong. Thanks for your time.
Always a pleasure, Kristen. Happy Thanksgiving.
Indeed, to you too. I want to start here. Indoor mask mandate returns to Santa Cruz County today. They were the first in the Bay Area counties. They're technically outside of the Bay Area, but they're first around here to lift it completely. And now they're going back. Why?
Well, I think they're looking at the future. They're seeing that progress has been stalled. And I think they're just frankly worried. A lot of the Bay Area actually has PTSD from last winter. And even though the numbers themselves aren't absolutely looking bad, like a few weeks or months ago, I think the trend is concerning to a lot of people. But again, it's subject to interpretation. So a lot of counties are looking at the same data and viewing things differently. And I think Santa Cruz is different, for example, from Monterey County, just very close by, who is going in the opposite direction.
Right. And I should say this one, I believe, also includes vaccinated people, too. So if you're in the grocery store, you got to put your mask on. But honestly, do you think there will be compliance given kind of the back and forth all the time?
I think it will be very hard for people to, sort of all do this as a population. I think there will be a group of people who will, and certainly, it's context dependent. The cases are going up overall, or at least not going down substantially. You're in a crowded area and it's indoors. I think probably not a bad idea to put on your mask even for a short time. But you're outdoors or it's less crowded, it really doesn't matter what you do.
Right. You talk about the data that public health officials are looking at. Look, let's talk about California. Today, about 15,000 new cases, 7-day positivity rate just under 2%. Correct me if I'm wrong. But ICU and hospitalization both seem to be down slightly. What do you make of this? What is the story?
Well, the story is that it's at a very, very high level still. So we're not all the way down the mountain. And, we're not exploding in cases, but we're at a very tentative point. It's like we're walking on a tightrope and we can easily fall. But I don't think we'll ever get to last year. I mean, enough people are vaccinated where we're not going to see overwhelming of hospitalizations, except for the influence of influenza with COVID. But I think for the most part, you see a big rise in cases. Everybody will get excited. We will see a creep up in hospitalizations, but probably not to the same extent.
Okay. Which brings me to the booster conversation. The Wall Street Journal reviewed a massive amount of data from states, and it seems to sharpen the picture of who really needs a booster. That is, who is most likely to get serious infections after full vaccination. So tell us, who are the most vulnerable?
So if you want to get one take-home point, it's age. So age over 65 brings you to the hospital with a breakthrough infection, but it also increases your risk of dying. So that's above 65. I think 85% of the deaths of people who have breakthrough infections are in that population. Now, outside of that age group, if you have diabetes, if you have lung disease, if you have heart disease, or those kinds of comorbidities, you're at risk of going to the hospital, but not necessarily of dying if you're younger.
Which are the chronic diseases that tend to be more linked to breakthrough cases?
It's definitely lung disease, diabetes. I think kidney disease is another one, particularly people on dialysis. That's frequently been linked with breakthrough infection turning to breakthrough hospitalization.
Got it. So those are the folks that you as a doctor hope to see get boosted right away.
Yes,
right? Okay.
Definitely.
So cases are still being driven mainly by the unvaccinated, but this same data review also shows vaccinated people are now accounting for a larger share of cases. Why? Is it tied to waning immunity?
Well, if you think about how we rolled out the vaccines, it started off in the most vulnerable group. And yes, if you look at older than 65s, for example, more than 70% of them got their vaccine series more than 6 months ago. We know that waning immunity starts at around the 6-month mark. So it makes sense that that group, already vulnerable, is really driving hospitalizations and breakthrough infections.
Got it. Okay. Look, how many hospitalizations and deaths among fully vaccinated people in the U.S. this year? Do we have the raw numbers?
So fully vaccinated people, it's still very, very low, but the data isn't really great. I want to say like 1 to 2%, but I'm not, I don't have the numbers at the tips of my fingers. And that's the point, that I think a lot of this data is hidden. And the Wall Street Journal is probably one of the first analyses to look at this in the US.
Yeah. What percentage of the fully vaccinated have gotten boosted? Do we know that?
Yes, it all depends on what state you live in. And the data hasn't really kept track with like last week, for example, because I know in the Bay Area, people have been rushing recently, so it's harder to get appointments.
Yes.
But until last week or so, the Bay Area or California was like 10% of eligible people getting booster shots. You look at other states like Missouri, or not Missouri, like Minnesota, North Dakota, they're like 30%. So California, New York, New Jersey were at the lowest of the US. And probably because we weren't really feeling like we needed to. But people like Minnesota, they're seeing a lot of cases swimming around. Some of the other states with a lot of breakthrough infections leading to hospitalizations, Colorado and New Mexico were also having higher booster uptake rates. But I think this is changing a little bit as we get the word.
Okay. Oh, that is interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. I thought because in the Bay Area it's so hard to get an appointment, we must have a really high booster rate. But hey, I did get my booster. I got it yesterday, and after getting 2 shots of Pfizer back in April, right? This time they gave me a choice, so I opted for Moderna because we had talked about the potential benefits of mixing. I will say what's interesting for me is that even though I didn't have any side effects the first 2 shots with the Pfizer, this time I woke up overnight like shivering, like I had a fever and I had a kind of a headache, popped a couple Tylenols, and now I feel for the most part fine, just a little fatigued. So I guess my first question is, what do you think, about that? Is it unusual to get, side effects with a booster that when you didn't get it the first 2 times?
For some reason, anecdotally, I've been hearing a lot of people having some sort of reaction, meaning in a positive way, like your immune system is saying, hey, I see what you're trying to do, and let me respond to that. So with the same symptoms you mentioned, Kristen. But again, the absence of reaction doesn't mean you're not having an immune reaction when we look at the response of people in the trials. But something about reminding the immune system every time makes it announce that, yes, I do remember, and that's what you're feeling. And I don't know what it is about Moderna, but again, anecdotally, I've been hearing a lot of my colleagues who've gotten Moderna who also say the same thing like you have, Kristen.
Okay, so it could be the 3rd shot effect, or it could be the Moderna effect, which the Moderna booster, I understand, is half the dose of the original, right? But are there still more of the active ingredients in there than there is in the Pfizer full dose that you would have gotten as a Pfizer
I think it's
booster?
about this. It's kind of equalized now with the half-dose Moderna and the regular Pfizer.
Okay. Okay, another question is, because it was the middle of the night, I just popped whatever pain reliever was there, and I took Tylenol. Is that okay? I remember early on in the pandemic, we reported something about COVID and Tylenol, and I don't even remember, but I made a note to ask you about that. Is that okay?
Definitely okay. I mean, particularly since you're just reminding the immune system now, it's not going to prevent it from mounting a response.
Got it. Okay, Dr. Peter Chin-Hong, don't go away. When we come back, we want to talk about the vaccination effort going on for kids, and also talk about having a Thanksgiving that's safe and celebratory at the same time, how to do it. Join us on Facebook Live, if you will, while we take a short break, and we'll answer your questions. All right, Dr. Peter Chin Hong, thank you for sticking around during break and answering some of your questions. Daniel has one. Does Dr. Chin Hong suspect that there will be waning immunity for people down the road who got booster shots? That's a great question.
That's a great question, Daniel. Something I think we're all asking ourselves. My hunch is that there won't be, just because we have other vaccines, measles, MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, human papillomavirus, hepatitis B vaccines, where the punch 2 in the beginning, booster after a few months seems to carry us for several years. Unless we get a crazy new variant, I think this is going to last for much longer. But again, we're going to watch out because this is a new virus.
Okay. All right. Maria pointed out to me Moderna has 100 micrograms versus 30 micrograms for Pfizer. So I guess that means the booster is 50 micrograms. Does that sound about right? So it is a little...
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, but you can't really compare it exactly, but it's about, I would call it around the same.
Okay.
Half dose of Moderna and meaning.
Okay. Robert wants to know, how good are the boosters holding up against breakthrough infections?
Oh, they're holding up really well. We have... some good randomized control data now recently released from Pfizer. They looked at 10,000 people. And basically when you get a booster, it's like turning back the clock on the good old days of vaccines. So 95% vaccine efficacy against symptomatic disease. Amazing.
Okay. John wants to know, do you think we'll need a shot every 6 months? I got to tell you, my own parents are asking me about that. Like, how often? There are a lot of people who are scared of just getting shots.
I don't think so, unless we have a new crazy variant that looks completely different from this variant. I think this will carry us through. But again, this has been so humbling in terms of predicting COVID. We never really know. But,
all right.
I'm hoping at least once a year, if not, never again, except maybe in a few years.
Okay. We're coming back on TV. All right, we're back on air with Dr. Peter Chin Hong of UCSF answering your questions. Erica has one. If you had the J&J vaccine and boosted with Moderna, how long does it protect you?
That's a great question from Erica. We think that it will probably protect you at least 6 months, if not longer. I think we will follow people over time. Something about getting a J&J shot period, just one, keeps you with a very steady immune response for many, many months, as opposed to Pfizer, which kind of goes down. So the combination of that stability plus the booster will carry you at least 6 months, if not longer, is my prediction.
All right. Dawn wants to know, is it true that repeated vaccines can increase side effects such as inflammation and clotting, regardless of age group?
No, that's not true. There's only one vaccine really associated with clotting, and that's the adenovirus vector vaccine, so either AstraZeneca or J&J. So if you get an mRNA, Pfizer, Moderna, there's no real risk with clotting with those vaccines. And the risk of clotting is really, really small in general. So even if you got one J&J followed by another J&J, at least in the experience so far, it hasn't really increased the risk of clotting overall, but we're continuing to follow that.
All right. How's the vaccination effort going for kids 5 to 11 in California? That group, of course, just became eligible a couple of weeks ago.
So it varies around the state, but California is kind of going gangbusters, actually, in 5 to 11-year-olds. Already 1 in 10 has gotten vaccinated. But if you look around the state, 10% of the kids in LA, 40% in Marin, and 25% in San Francisco. Could you believe Marin, 40%?
Okay, of course, that's not surprising. It's Marin. Look, cases are inching up nationwide just as Thanksgiving arrives, right? Officials, notably this year, are not saying don't gather or celebrate. The message is more celebrate as safely as possible, right? So, Dr. Chin Hong, to you, what are examples of doing that as safely as possible?
I think it's kind of knowing who your group is. For example, if you're going to meet with a family group that includes elderly relatives, and you have your unvaccinated kids with you, it may be a little bit harder if they're unboosted. But if they're boosted, everybody else is vaccinated, and there's some kids around who may have had partial vaccination, it's probably going to be fine. Again, the larger number of people you bring together and the more unknown risks you bring together, you're going to increase the risk. But in general, it's a very, very different place from where we were last year.
I've heard of one example of a friend who's going to have everyone who comes. Not everyone gets a rapid test, you know, one of those antigen ones, the ones you can get at the, you know, Walmart or grocery store. But maybe one representative from each family gets it. So I guess that's the implication is if you're fine, your whole family's fine. So 10 families work together.
I think it's a clever and cost-effective solution. I've also heard another solution that might make people cringe a little bit.
What?
Which is the idea of family pool testing. So again, nobody has symptoms. You think you're generally safe. You just pass the swab around in your family and you use it once. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everyone.
Yes, yes. Okay, contemplate that. I love my family very much, but all right.
I don't know. You don't want to put their nose where your nose is going.
It's a novel idea. Anything is worth considering. Look, in Australia, I understand cases are going back in Europe, and I want to look at what some of they're doing, the things that they're doing. They're locking down with 66% vaccinated. In the U.S., we're less than that. We're at 59% vaccinated. Can you see us going back there to a place of lockdown?
No.
Okay.
I don't think we'll go back there as a country.
And you don't think we would need to, right? I mean, with the antiviral pills coming out very soon, and right?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see regional surges. For example, right now, nothing is happening in Florida, and all the action is in Michigan and Minnesota, Vermont, and New Hampshire, maybe some New Mexico and Colorado. But, you know, it's not going to be the whole country on fire. So I think that will happen again if it's happening in wintertime, and we'll just move around resources. And you're right, we have a lot more therapies at hand for breakthrough infections. So crossing fingers, I think things are going to look a little bit different.
Okay. Look, I know before you go, hopefully you can share this new CDC study that tells us something about the Delta variant and childbirths.
Yeah, so the CDC released 2 studies on Friday showing that not only can pregnant persons get preterm labor and early births, but they can actually have fetal loss. So stillbirths was described by the CDC in 2 studies. Background rate in the US, 0.5%. Pre-Delta, 1% of pregnant persons with COVID. During Delta, a whopping 2.5 to 3% of pregnancies resulted in fetal demise. So if ever there's a reason to get the vaccine, please get it if you're pregnant.
All right, Dr. Chin Hong, thank you so very much. Now that I've thought about it more, yeah, I mean, I share a can of soda with my family. What's sharing a swab, right?
I know.
Right?
I mean, that's what they call pool testing. You know, that's pool testing.
Yes, indeed. All right, thank you so much for your insight and advice. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Same to you, Kristen.
Thank you. All right, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll address the rising smash and grab theft rings in San Francisco and throughout the Bay Area and what can be done about it with someone from the Chamber of Commerce. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, great questions today, so I thank you for that. Always great to have your participation, so keep them coming. And we'll turn our show to another huge story, you know, big headlines over the weekend in the Bay Area, certainly a wave of mass robberies. So we're going to take a moment to prepare for that interview. Enjoy this lovely view of the Bay, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Getting Answers. You've no doubt seen the video by now. People streaming into high-end stores and cleaning them out. It started on Friday night in San Francisco, Union Square, where numerous videos capture the crime as it happened. Thieves cleaned out the Louis Vuitton store. It was just one of several businesses targeted. Joining us now is Rodney Fong with the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. Rodney, thanks for joining us today.
Hi there. Thank you.
We'd like to try to seek solutions, but before we get to that, have you talked to these businesses, whether it's the Louis Vuitton or I know there are others that were also hit, Hermes and Fendi in the area, Bloomingdale's, etc. How much was the total loss?
Well, I haven't had direct conversations with those that had suffered the loss, but we've been in constant contact for a long while now, not just over this weekend, with retailers in San Francisco who are frustrated, scared, very concerned about the safety for their employees, for their businesses, and obviously the loss of merchandise. But it's larger than that. It's about consumer confidence in San Francisco. We live in a lovely city. Union Square is a great place to do holiday shopping. And when we start to deteriorate the confidence of consumers in San Francisco, that's very concerning for us.
I mean, the timing couldn't be worse, right? I mean, you just put up the ice rink, you got the beautiful Christmas tree. People are coming to enjoy the sights and sounds and feel the mood of the season. But you look at the video like that and people won't want to come. Have you heard from businesses that were hit? I know you said you didn't talk to them directly, but do you know if some are considering closing? I mean, I know some are closing temporarily, boarding up or shortening their hours, but have they talked about what they might do as a result?
No, I haven't heard about any of them threatening to close in the immediate future, but they are concerned. And as you pointed out, the ice rink is up. Christmas tree lighting are happening throughout the city. And, I want to mention that this video is awfully disturbing, I think, for all of us as we're watching it. But it doesn't happen all the time. San Francisco right now, I'm down at Fisherman's Wharf, and Jefferson Street is packed with visitors and locals enjoying the time that they have off of school or work. And I think Union Square is probably enjoying the same thing now. So this is not a continuous presence that's occurring in downtown San Francisco, but that event on, I believe, Friday night was very unfortunate.
Yes, but it doesn't take too many isolated incidents, if they happen enough, for people to be deterred. So this is where we seek solutions. The mayor has said this is unacceptable, so has Police Chief Bill Scott. So obviously action will be taken and we'll be watching to see what they are. But what kind of action, concrete things, do you think should happen?
Well, I think the mayor and Chief Scott have done a great job in response to this particular incident, setting up a command post. I think for all of us, whether we are business owners or employees or consumers, having police presence is really important. Knowing that there are eyes on the street watching out for us, watching out for each other, having the streets crowded with other shoppers and other employees is really important to look out after each other. And so I applaud what the police department is doing. I know they could use more resources. The Chamber of Commerce is going to be absolutely supportive of more resources for law enforcement, for the use of technology potentially to help solve some of these crimes and more importantly, deter them from happening.
I was just going to say, I mean, we have technology. We do have technology available, right? I mean, there are license plate readers, there's facial recognition, but I do believe the Board of Supervisors, I mean, we made a conscious decision to not employ those technologies that are available. Do you believe it's time to revisit that?
I believe so. I believe we live in California. We've got some great technology. I absolutely respect privacy, but I think when it comes to public safety and when the cost of deploying humans is very expensive, that we can use technology to help aid and deter criminal activity, but also be on the eyes on the street for something else that may be happening that any of us may want to be able to have video or access to rewind the tape to find out what's going on. So I'm a proponent of technology. I know all of our businesses are to a great extent. And so we are, I think, at a time now in San Francisco where we are looking at the Great Reset as well. The current government standards and policies that we have now have worked for us for many, many years, for decades. But the world is changing, and I think we need to adapt here in San Francisco as well.
Where do you think the bigger problem is? Not enough arrests previously, or not enough prosecution, or perhaps just the law itself? For example, Prop 47, which made it so that if you stole things under $950, it would be a misdemeanor.
All of the above. I don't think it's one particular solution to it. Prop 47, I think, it does need to be reviewed. That is not helping things. But I think also, reform in the justice system, reform in the police departments as well. We need to re-examine how we're going to run our cities. San Francisco is a great city. San Jose is a great city. Sacramento, Los Angeles. And we want to make sure that California remains as a safe state. I say state because many of these laws and issues are statewide, not necessarily just local. But here in San Francisco, I know we can do better. I think the residents of San Francisco know we can do better. We expect better. This is a world-class city, and in all aspects, including law enforcement, we need to be a world-class city.
Mm-hmm. There is a regional task force that's being formed to deal with this retail theft. Can you shed some light on how it's going to work?
Yeah, so I'm not sure of the results, but I know that over the last few weeks, Supervisor Asa Safi has reached out to many of the folks in the hospitality tourism world to try to partake in how we can try to thwart retail theft. It is a rampant thing that has happened. I think it hasn't been the primary reason that businesses have closed, but it's certainly given everyone a little bit of pause. And, I want to mention, we sometimes hear the name brand stores that are affected. The real folks that are going to pay the most are the small businesses, the mom and pop who can't afford additional security, the mom and pop who opens the store themselves, or maybe has their cousin or the relative opening, and leave themselves vulnerable to theft, to maybe even violence. And that's a scary thing, especially when your livelihood depends on that. I want to make mention that for small business, for a lot of people, that's the only resort they have to provide an income for their family.
Understood. They can't go online like the biggies can, right? I mean, you got the mom and pops in the Sunset, in the Mission, in North Beach, Chinatown, all of that.
That's right, and that is a way of life for many generations, entrepreneurism.
All right,
and
Rodney,
so once we destroy
let's continue this conversation on Facebook Live. Rodney Fong, San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. We'll be right back. All right, we are off air, but we are on Facebook Live finishing our conversation. So Rodney, pardon the interruptions, please finish your thought.
No problem. I just want to point out that the real folks that suffer in this sort of looting, and we hear about the big businesses being impacted, it's really the small businesses that are potentially fearful of opening up their own stores and having to deal with theft, having to deal with grab and runs and smash and grabs. These are the lifeblood of the Bay Area of America, small businesses. And so when they start to have second thoughts about opening a new store, opening a second store, expanding and maybe bringing their relatives into the work to the store, it's cause of concern. And so small businesses is a huge piece of this, even though the name brands are being mentioned currently.
Yes, absolutely a great point, and I'm glad you made it. I wonder if you're already hearing from whether it's tourist groups, travel agencies, or perhaps conventions that already, seeing these types of smash and grab, retail looting is already discouraging them from coming to San Francisco?
Well, I don't think the smash and grab necessarily, but, for years now, before COVID, San Francisco was suffering from its conditions on the streets. And whether they were individual tourists or conventions having second thoughts about coming to San Francisco, and made those businesses decisions based on that. That's got to change. San Francisco is largely dependent on tourism. It's largely dependent for our workforce. All of our friends and families who work in hospitality depend on that. And so we need to do a better job. Our electeds need to do a better job. Us as individuals and business associations need to do a better job. And as I mentioned, this is call for a great reset of San Francisco. We have done a lot of great compassionate things for a lot of folks, but I think it's time to reevaluate where we need to put our priorities, education, public safety, some pretty basic things.
Thank you, Rodney. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. World News Tonight is coming up next, and I'll see you back here at 4.